Good morning, I'm Christian Ramos, reporter for INQUIRER.net, and you're watching INQside Look. In today's episode, we have Senatorial aspirant Mindanao civic leader Samira Gutoc. Ma'am, good morning. Thank you for joining us. How are you po?
Yes, good morning, Christina. This is the second month na siguro after post-taking and filing. So yes po, a bit hilo, whirlwind, but very grateful the Inquirer had time. It's my first yata na one-on-one.
Thank you again for joining us, ma'am. So we're gonna start off with this has been your second time running or vying for a Senate seat. How will this be different, and what learnings will you take from your previous senatorial bid in your campaign this time around?
I remained, Ma'am Christina, dedicated to compassion as a compass. It's the need, no? The need of the time. Ngayon po na, in a historic sense, this is the worst time of our history, no? Worldwide, at pati tayo sa Pilipinas. Many did not get to bury their relatives, and I know that being a frontliner in a way for Rescue Team Marawi. So what's different right now is I have a fuller, maybe deeper narrative and understanding of realities in the community. Hindi po kwentong barbero ang funeral parlor na pagbisita ko sa mga funeral parlor and cemeteries and even COVID wards. So what's different is that I have more stories to tell, Christine.
Now, the public was surprised with your transfer from the Liberal Party to Aksyon Demokratiko. What were the factors that pushed you into transferring to another party?
Kala ko hindi na yung matatanong kasi parang, di ba? Thank you, Christina. You know, there's just so much issues that we can face aside from the personal trials and struggles. But yes, of course, dahil nasa political party tayo at political endeavor, yes po, I was actively dedicated to the Liberal Party for the past 2019, 18, 20. We were doing humanitarian work, no, with them, no, Team Lenny and all in Mindanao. But also in my NGO called Ako Bakwit, we were able to work with with Aksyon Demokratiko, and they actually invited me and offered me a national execom position. So nagpaalam naman po ako, Christina, no, I'm not an insensitive human political person. I'm not a manhid. Hindi ako po walang utang na loob na basta na lang aalis without any proper courtesy to the party that gave me life, no? That gave me awareness from somebody in the survey, no, masyadong malayo, 60, to somebody who rose, no, with 300% awareness. So yes, Ma'am Christina, I acknowledge, I consulted everyone, my advisors, the communities that I work with, the evacuees, especially the evacuees who I carry po, Ma'am Christina. So this might be the first time that there is an actual evacuee leader voicing out in the Senate, in the Senate race.
Now, I'm just curious, ma'am, what made you decide to run again for the Senate?
The same specific reason that I was invited to run. I've always been a man open that I'm not a politico, and I was invited the first time by civil society sa Ocho Derecho as a woman leader, and the only woman at that, no, among the 8. And I'm very grateful to that. Senator Kiko, everyone po, VP Lenny, lahat po ng mga organizations na tumulong sa akin, binibigyan pa ako ng mga tsinelas. Sana po maabot ito sa Inquirer yung aking taus-pusong pagsasalamat, especially pagdating ko sa mga probinsya, hindi ko kayo nakahanap, yung lahat ng tumulong. So definitely, ma'am, those who invested attention, concern to me, there's a documentary called The Thousand Cuts. My voice was there, my passion, no, to fight, no, injustice was there, and I continue, ma'am, whether in the non-NGO or the non-government sense, or now the government if I win. So this is a part of that journey po na I had to decide as well to make it formal yung aking pagkumite sa ating aksyon, bilis kilos na filosofiya, advocacy.
Now let's talk about the campaign naman po. Ma'am, what challenges do you see in mounting an effective senatorial campaign? Considering now we're in a pandemic, there are limitations, health risks, campaign funding, and how do you ensure that you reach as much people as you can?
I'd like to also pay tribute to many of the frontliners who help us, assist us to get to observe all the protocols, no? And of course, the party who facilitates it, Aksyon Demokratiko. So Mayor Yorme, katrabaho ko kasi sa mga Ako Bakwit initiatives where we served the stranded in Manila. We served almost nga 50K na mga stranded, mga iba't ibang tribo at mga tao eh. So what's different, ma'am, is that we are able to get as necessary protocols from a party that arranges everything, the meetings with the community, sectoral. We're in Mindanao soon and this week. So yun po, ma'am, the party arranges all that. What's different is that ngayon, puro swab kami. I have swabbing every week. We have a team, no, that goes down, that really seeks out the communities. Although we did that, of course, in Ocho Derecho, we were always talking to the communities. But right now, we're a small team of 3 senatorials and Doc Willie Ong as vice presidential and Presidential Yorme. So 5 of us. Parang madali kami makamove. We're very few, and we get to visit as many of our LGUs and communities.
Now, what do you usually talk about po in these visits to different provinces? How do you convince the Filipinos there to vote for Samira Gutoc and put her in the Senate?
Ang challenge dito, Chris, is like yung limitation of airtime, 3 minutes to go, 3 minutes to speak. Paano ko ikakwento yung statistiko na malnourishment has not changed in the Philippines, no? And kami pa sa Bangsamoro homeland, the poorest in all SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. How can I tell that in 3 minutes? So the pain of one is the pain of all. Ganun po yung aking thrust, ma'am, that the vulnerability of all these sectors na marginalized, which I bring to the table po, is something na gusto kong maintindihan ng tao na kung hindi liderato, and it's an executive level, it's also a legislative level at that branch na pwede pong magkaroon ng fostered change, no? Budget allocation, principle of social justice, all these constitutional precepts should come into life through the voice of a senatorial or a senator or congressperson. So I bring that, ma'am, that kailangan po i-connect yung rural reality natin, which I come from. I come from Marawi. I lived in an evacuee life in a small room, nakasya lang 2 tao, pero pinagkasya namin na sarili namin for 3 years, literally, Chris. So this is not a buhu story na parang wala lang si Sam nakuha ng pera, no? Nakuha ng ano. No. Aksyon has definitely offered a philosophy that I can resonate with. Bilis kilos. We really need action. And the Manila as a prototype, and Doc Willie with your man, and the Doc Leong as an actual doctor advisor to so many millions of people. They offer the prototypes of leadership that we actually need for the next 3 years to survive.
You mentioned being from Marawi, Ma'am Samira, and in the Senate, should you win a Senate seat, how will you push for the interest of people in Mindanao, particularly in Marawi, in terms of peace and security, and of course the rehabilitation process? How will you do that in the upper chamber po?
By definitely presenting it as it is po, Ma'am Chris, the reality of underdevelopment. Ang underdevelopment ay isang realidad po sa mga malalayo. If it needs kailangan legislative oversight, as active as we can, working with BBM, working with COA to really ask mayors to deliver, no, and barangay captains. I will do that as a senatorial. I was former legislator po, Ma'am Chris, sa Bangsamoro, sa ARMM. So I know how it is to be actively engaging the stakeholders, the DPWH. Kumusta na po yung ating roads? Yung every week po, we ask for reports, and an open government that has websites and uploading of materials, information, finance reports. That is something I'd like to see, that at least kampante po yung voters, yung tao, civilians, that their government is functioning and answering back to them, that somebody will die not alone because somebody took care of his needs.
Now, shifting to more recent issues, now the Senate and the Executive Department, there's some kind of conflict po dahil doon sa investigasyon ng Blue Ribbon Committee. Merong mga nagsasabi na kumbaga si President Duterte daw po parang pinipigilan yung pag-transpire nitong investigasyon. Now, if you win, in the Senate, how will you push for an independent Senate, especially if Mayor Isko wins the presidency? How will you do that po?
Well, literally, of course, is to be the non-partisan person that you can be, no? Na wala kang dinidepend sa kung interes. Because I think that's one of the questions right now is, who are we lawyering for? Are we lawyering for these contractors po na family? So, alam ko po na emotional po sa amin sa Mindanao itong issue ng health services, because I, for one, know that many of us were able to reach an ICU or get ito silumusub medicine or a recidivir. The PPEs did not arrive really ASAP, no, from that March lockdown last year. So talaga pong formally is that a testament na pag wrong implementation or lack of transparency, accountability ay pwede pong it denies the real actual victims or service needed for people. So I will be the non-partisan investigative so-called part of that investigative power oversight of Senate to ask, to question. If the families reaches out to me because they need to reason out with me as a senatorial, with due process, I listen in, but won't be their defender. But of course, I'll listen, no? I'll listen, and I'll also be asserting the non-negotiability of transparency and compliance to standards po, Ma'am Chris.
I'm gonna ask a bit more controversial question po. The PDP Laban Kusi Wing is pushing for President Duterte to run for the Senate. I'm just curious, what's your take on that po? Kasi earlier they pushed him for to be their vice presidential candidate, and now they're pushing him or convincing him to run for the Senate. What's your take on that?
Of course, there is a literal non-hindrance naman, no? But sometimes what's legal is not necessarily moral, di ba, Chris? We've already served 6 years, and there's not much in history except the Marcos that you repeat, no? You repeat the certain person over in a presidential, vice presidential, magkakapalit lang. I mean, in a time right now na pandemic and very senior na po yung age ni Vice President, I wish you'd consider that some of the necessary realities right now of being physically there to people, being able to meet them. Kasi sa Marawi po, it's an example, hindi namin siya makausap because of the limitation of pandemic for 2 years, or actually 5 years, ma'am. So parang because of his age, because of his limitation. So Marawi is that example that you cannot, as a senior citizen, be able to get the necessary resolutions at hand dahil sa iyong edad, dahil sa limitasyon ng iyong edad. So it's not really popularity, even kahit sasabihin natin demokrasya siyang binoto po ng tao. Meron din sana po other moral reasons to consider, no? That as a law student, alam namin po, hindi lahat ng legal ay moral.
Now, ma'am, I'm gonna ask you about different issues so that the public will know where you stand on these issues. First po, a more recent one is the substitution rule under the Omnibus Election Code. Yung substitution due to withdrawal. There have been several candidates backing bills to amend the law to remove that. For you po, ano yung stand nyo on this?
We should have a limitation to substitution rule. Napakasad po na nagagamit siya to hold in suspense the public, the voters. We need a clear cut, no, deadlines, no, for people to know who are running, no, for the elections, for the public office. And so substitution should be only upon exceptional instances like death. So hindi po maganda na you keep the people guessing at bay. So substitution rule should be tempered, no, with necessary limitations para na po for people to mailatis nila, maalam nila yung ating mga candidates. Yes po.
Ma'am, now amid the oil price hike today, what do you say about the suspension of fuel excise tax? What's your stand on this po?
Spending the taxes, as you know, is something welcome. Taxes, syempre, lifeblood natin, pero suspending it for a while and for people to get back on track yung ating ekonomiya na maraming tulog, I bring to the fore kasi po yung mga vendors and all affected by the gasoline hike and the price hike of oil, no, where people have to cook something. So these vendors are some people that I really regularly deal with. So napakaraming bagay po yung suspension of excise taxes.
Now, how about the COVID response, ma'am? How can the government improve this, and how can you improve this if you win a Senate seat?
Setting up the surveillance unit. I think there was, when we had COVID, December, January, hearing it from China, wala agad surveillance division tayo or unit, and we need that set up. Working with other countries, of course, so that we can get the best technologies out there, best practices out there from New Zealand and all. Contact trace, treat, massively vaccine. And I'm from that community na ayaw magpa-vaccine dahil naniniwala sila sa mga ilang superstitions or fake news. So let me take this opportunity na survivor po kami ng COVID, even if we're from Marawi, na greatest air siguro in the Philippines is up at top of mountain, but you know, everyone will be victims of COVID. Hindi dahil sa magandang environment, nasa probinsya ka, hindi ka maapektuhan.
Now, ma'am, how about the West Philippine Sea issue? What's your stand on that po?
As an international law student, no, sinasabi ko, or international studies student, sinisingit ko palagi kasi yung experience ko, kasi people don't know, no, where I'm coming from maybe. At international studies students, syempre may sovereignty tayo, mayroong territory. There are Hague rulings that are to be recognized already na cover the Philippines and China and the other competing parties, no, to the waters natin sa WPS. So recognize those rulings in the past and assert it. Why will we be afraid, no, that China has the wherewithal army power? Kaya nga may diplomasya, may negosasyon, merong international treaties that we respect. So I'm sure China, which has a long history with us in trade, heritage, ancestry, and presence in Manila and in the parts of the country, meron pong respeto. Huwag tayo matakot bilang maliit na bansa to assert ourselves.
Now, the war on drugs, ma'am. I know that before you have, there was an uproar about what you said in an earlier interview. Now, what's your stand on the drug war and also the ICC probe, the looming ICC probe?
Strengthen the rule of law, pillars of justice, na yung drug war po ay kinakailangan yung prosecution, identification of suspects, hindi po pagpatay. So siguro po klaro naman po in that debate where I debated with then PNP Chief Bato in the 2019. So I have been also active po in the CHR level po, CHR no forums to push for human rights, and in Mindanao, especially po na there could be disappearances. So yung ICC po, yung rule of law has to be observed, the due process has to be respected. Of course, the president, kung iimbestigahan siya, sana po respeto niya na we are part, no, of the law of nations of the world at hindi tayo umiiwas.
Now, same-sex marriage, what's your stand on that po?
Well, I would take a more tempered role na dapat mauna yung anti-discrimination law, kasi without pagkikilala sa atin ng mga LGBT, hindi po aabot tayo sa marriage rights or union rights. So dapat unahin po yung mga batas na kilalanin po sila. Right now we only have ordinances, no, in different parts of the country that recognize the LGBT, the anti-discrimination ordinance, which should be nationalized.
How about divorce, ma'am? This bill has been languishing in Congress for how many years now? Now, what's your stand on this? When you are in the Senate, will you push for this? Will you reject this? What's your stand po?
Of course, we are proponent po of awareness, education, reproductive health ng mga kabataan, so that they will not be forced, no, into the hands of possible marriage and even to the point that they will not already decide to be together forever, no? So divorce is of time po. Nasabi ko naman po na there are so many examples. I went around the country. I've worked with women's groups, Women's Legal Bureau, and I know that as a Sharia student as well, Islamic law student, Philippine law student, na alam ko na marami na pong paghihirap ang mga iba na hindi makakuha ng annulment. So it's too tedious, it's too hard. And so women need that access, especially the abused women, to be able to secure divorce, especially pag malayo na, disappeared na yung lalaki for so long, di ba? So there's so many cases po na pwede na po sigurong magdesisyon ng korte at batas na deserving na po yung tao. We need that. We need that po. Timely na po. Timely na po yung divorce.
Now, how about charter change? There have been efforts to amend the Constitution, particularly on what they say are restrictive economic provisions. What's your stand on charter change?
Kami siguro sa malalayo, probinsya, Mindanao, ang napakahaba ng historia on federal discussions, centrists, and that's why nagkaroon ng budgeting allocation and all that, the sentiments of the provinces. So that's why yung Bangsamoro rin, Chris, if I don't know if you know, that one of the mandates ng sa BTC as commissioners was to draft also relevant provisions na baka maging prototype ang Bangsamoro towards a federal setup. So kung mag-success tayo sa Bangsamoro government, it could be a model for others. So yes po, there might be looking into, ma'am. Depende po sa research, science, and experience. Yes.
But how about the death penalty? The reimposition of the death penalty in the country?
Research shows that many don't deserve it. Many who have been found guilty, in languishing in courts, languishing in jails. I know this. I visit jails every now and then since I was in college. So alam ko po na marami dyan na wala lang attorney at tumagal. And even if prosecuted or convicted ay guilty, ay dahil lang wala silang proper legal aid. So the DNE, yung pinakamahihirap ang apektado po death penalty. Nagalit po kayo na sinabi ko no to death penalty sa terrorists. I meant lang po that death penalty po ay nasa environment po that the rule of law, legal education and legal access, ma-access po ng kahit sino, terrorista o hindi. So death penalty is not yet timely. Lakasan po natin ang pillars of justice system. Did you know, FYI, Miss Chris, that there's no lawyers na marami sa mga indigenous na katutubo? So how can they fight for their lands? How can they fight for themselves? Yung mga sektor na iba, kung wala po silang attorney.
How about political dynasty?
Very sad po. I'm very saddened by the fattening of dynasties. Lumalaki daw, hindi lang 2, 3, 4. Ang mga dynastiya, mayroon pa mga tumatakbo ngayon na may relasyon sa mga dynasties. So, respeto sa inyo, pero ano po, di ba? There are so many qualified lawyers and people out there that don't have this chance just because they don't have name recall. I take myself as an example. So, sana po dynasties matemper na po. Baka may limitasyon na po. Sana. Baka hindi na 5 tao na nasa gobyerno magkakapatid or magkakadugo. Tingnan niyo po yung how we can circulate power, decentralize it by lessening the dynasties existing.
Now, how about climate change?
Maliit po siya sa agenda kasi climate change, hindi mo nakikita, hindi mo nararamdaman, except mainit na ang panahon. So, again, bilang isang climate change advocate, activist, marami dapat gagawin. We don't need Greta's na i-remind yung mga matatanda yung obligasyon nila to reduce carbon emission. So I highlight the CHR inquiry by Greenpeace that kailangan pong tingnan ng climate change actions ng Pilipinas. So please educate our children on solid waste management, less garbage, less output sa ating mga landfill, So yan po, ma'am, we need climate change as part of our practices as companies, private sector government, less paperless technology na sana, and also our schools to help in the institutionalization of climate change practices.
Now, how about agrarian reform, ma'am? How will you address the concerns of those in the agricultural sector?
For one, agrarian reform, kailangan na po siguro i-implementa to the full, So I look at the education because I come from the provinces again. Kulang po yung awareness natin bilang bansa sa agrikultura at agrarian reform, knowing that land is the central cause of conflict of so many families, feuds, and even the struggle in the communist insurgency and in the struggle for right to self-determination ng Bangsamoro people. So agrarian reform has to be implemented to the full max. We need to get engaged the farmers, in the dialogues and the conversations. We need laws to implement further, or we need to oversight how we are implementing po, so that the farmers get their benefits po.
How about contractualization, ending ENDO? I know there's been a statement of Manila Mayor Isko Moreno saying that this is the least of his problems for now. Do you agree with that? What's your stand on contractualization?
I think this comes from a science or research po na, syempre, alam natin po, I've been pro-ENDO naman na, pro-ENDO. I mean, yung contractualization na sana hindi, kasi po kawawa naman po yung naalis lang every now and then sa kanyang trabaho. Kaya lang po, to force companies, I think that's the point where our party president is coming from. Na he knows that he's also the center of so many workers in Manila. He knows the impact po na liquidity issues sila, financial distress sila, bankruptcy issues sila dito sa mga kumpanya sa Cavite, Laguna, and everywhere. And to force company owners, to hire beyond contract is baka hindi kaya for the first years. But re-looking at it, Ma'am Christine, it's not going to be cast in stone. No, we're not for ENDO. We're not for ending ENDO.
How about the state of press freedom in the Philippines?
Namatayan kami, Chris. Namatayan kami sa Davao a few days ago ng isang journalist. At ako, minsan takot bilang manunulat sa aking sitwasyon. Nanggaling ako sa area na June 12, Independence Day, mga kabataan lang yon, ilan lang sila, socially distancing. Independence Day, hindi pinapulis pa sila just because they stood with their signages for Independence Day. So freedom of expression is really like scary right now under this dispensation and this environment. Di ba po? So freedom of the press, dapat po lakasan. Pagkitil sa ABS-CBN franchisa, it's something that could have been done backdoor, na pwede naman pong sabihin sa kanila may moratorium or may deadlines to pay what they need to pay. So sorry po yung mga congressman na you voted to end the ABS. It's not timely at this pandemic. What's again legal is not necessarily moral.
Now, for my last question, I just wanna have an overview of what will Samira Gutoc, what advocacies will she push in the upper chamber should she win a Senate seat in 2022?
Everyone is an expert on something. Pero siguro ang aking dinadala at tambag is the actuality of being there in the cemeteries and in the COVID wards. And so for me, a recovery plan for survivors of the dead, a recovery plan sa mga manggagawa na apektado. Kaya po sabi ko yung mga kumpanya, tingnan din natin yung sitwasyon nila. Pero bigyan ng gobyerno ng programa po yung mga workers. And internally displaced po, because it's important to me na dalhin ko sa consciousness po ng Pilipino po yung naapektuhan ng digmaan at natural disaster. Knowing that I was one of the humanitarian workers working for several disasters and crises in the Philippines. So yun po ang aking dadalhin, crisis recovery, crisis management, to internally displaced persons, because we don't have people working on the evacuee displacement concern. Literally lang, Ma'am Chris, access to water. Water and sanitation, health wash. You keep on saying hand wash, pero wala palang tubig sa mga evacuation centers where many of our victims of disasters are. So yun po, that's important to me.
I'm just curious lang din, ma'am, what committee will you want to chair should you win in this?
Ganun kabilis. Ganun kalayo, thinking ahead. Committee on, I think resources, I think natural resources, but at the same time, disaster. If there's a disaster. I also am passionate about education, so baka doon po. Depende po kung saan po ko rin ilagay, but I think, bring to the fore, especially sa mga kabataan, because I work a lot with the young people, and with due respect sa ibang senatorials, sa edad, baka ako yung one of the youngest, and I work literally with the youth. So I'd like to be in the Committee on Youth, maybe education, even resources. Para naman po yung sinasabi ko may palalagyan.
Okay. Ma'am, thank you again for making time for this interview. Best of luck po in your campaign. Please stay safe. Now, that has been Senatorial Aspirant Mindanao Civic Leader Samira Gutoc, and this has been INQside Look.